my career as a naturalist and a botanist. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
John, but you're next.
I thought Greg was next. Hi everyone, it's nice to see such a big group of here of people who are interested in conservation and protecting our natural areas. Oops, can you all hear me? You know, it's a great pleasure for me to be here to present this award to Richard Heiser, Nate Finck's nephew. It's only sad that Nate couldn't be here. In the words of John Brashear, he has left this big round world. So, but Richard's here, and I'd like to speak a little bit about Nate. I first met Nate back in the 1960s, the late 1960s. Nate was working at the trail site. He was at North Chagrin Reservation of the Cleveland Metro Parks, where he was a naturalist. I lived not too far from there. I lived in Euclid. So it was about a 5-mile bicycle trip up there, and I loved to hike the trails. Two of my favorites were the Sylvan Trail and the Overlook Trail. Some of you are familiar with the park might remember the little trailside museum there. It burned down a number of years ago. I think they had a lightning storm or something that struck it and burned it down. But that particular day when I met Nate, he was it was a beautiful day. He was in the Trailside Museum. And Nate was a real people person. It was always easy to talk to. He was a fun person to be around. We chatted for quite a while there, and we became good friends, and we remained friends throughout his life. I told him about my school. I was at Ohio State at the time. I was in the School of Natural Resources, and he talked about how he had gone to Ohio State. He earned both a bachelor's degree and a master's in botany while he was there. And he asked me if I would be interested in the summer job. I had worked the previous year, I had worked as a nature counselor at a summer camp, so I worked one summer, and after I graduated, I worked part of the summer with him. Nate told me about his family history. Nate was born in 1925, so he was a child of the Depression. They were, needless to say, they were tough years for a lot of people, but his whole family, all of his siblings, I think he had 4 or 5 children, siblings were college educated. And after Nate graduated with his master's degree, he spent some years in the military. That was the tail end of World War II. So he was involved in that, and also he got caught up in Korea, the Korean conflict. He was actually sent over to Korea for some time. But after he got out of the military, he started teaching school. And he because of his background his education in botany and his interest in natural history, he was able to work summers with the National Park Service. And it was always fun listening to him talking about his experiences. One of his favorite parks was Great Smoky Mountains. If any of you have been down there, you know how Gatlinburg has grown up around the park, and it's kind of a ticky-tacky place just because how big it's become. But they told me about when he worked down there in the 50s, it was just a small little town. So it was kind of neat talking to him about that. In the 1960s, because of his park experience, Nate was offered a position as a naturalist with the Cleveland Park District. And he accepted the position, but shortly afterwards, he was also offered a position with the National Park Service as a full-time park naturalist. And Nate felt it was kind of a measure of the person. He had already accepted the job with Cleveland, so he felt even though the job with the National Park Service would have been more prestigious and would have been a more desirable job, he stuck with his commitment to the Cleveland Park system and worked there for quite a number of years. Just as an indication of his responsibility and interest in the natural world, Nate was involved in quite a few natural history organizations. He was a life member of the Wilderness Society, he told me. And that was Nate wasn't making a great deal of money, so that was a financial commitment to send them that much money. And also, he he was involved with quite a few other environmental groups, Sierra Club, Audubon Society, Native Plant Society. I could go on and on with that. But, Nate is indeed a true hero of conservation because of what influence he had on so many young people in many of his years in teaching and as a naturalist throughout his life. And I can't think of a better person to consider a hero, and our world would be a much better place if we had more people like him. So without further ado, Richard Heiser, would you come forward for proceedings? It's an honor to give you this.
Thank you very much.
If you'd like to say anything, you're welcome to.
Well, I just want to thank the Protect Geauga Parks for this wonderful honor on behalf of my uncle. I know my uncle would be really thrilled, and my family would be really thrilled as well. I don't have that much more to add beyond the wonderful comments that John made on behalf of my uncle. So John, thank you for those wonderful comments and also the wonderful biography that was written about my uncle in the program today. My uncle was really a wonderful person. He was a kind, compassionate man, and he was an important pillar in my life, along with my parents and my other aunts and uncles. And he had just a ton of friends, and he was involved in a lot of organizations, and he was well known and he was well respected in the botany and the science community. And he was really a wonderful person. And to sum up my uncle, he loved nature, and he loved nature so much that when we planned his funeral together, we pre-planned his funeral together when he, years before he passed away, and I was involved in managing his affairs with him. And he loved nature so much that he asked the man who designed his gravestone if he could have on his gravestone, he loved nature. And so his gravestone states his name, his date of birth, his date of death, and it states he loved nature. So anybody who visits his grave will see this is a man who loved nature. And the other request that he had when we were planning his funeral was that he wanted to be buried in a small cemetery across the street from the entrance to the North Shore Reservation of the Cleveland Metro Parks. And that's where he was buried. And you could see the entrance to the park and the site where he was buried. And the really wonderful thing that happened was, when we were burying my uncle, there was a flock of geese or ducks that flew over the cemetery in a V pattern. And it was really awesome to see. And I like to think that it was nature's way of welcoming my uncle into heaven. So thank you very much for this wonderful award, and thank you for the Geauga Parks, Protect Geauga Parks, for giving my uncle this award. And I want to thank everybody for coming today, and I also want to offer my congratulations to the other honorees today as well. So thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is John Leach, and I have the honor of honoring Greg Studen, a longtime friend of mine, and I'm sure of many people here in the room. Greg has had an environmental impact, I believe, on all of us in this room and all the people in northeastern Ohio, whether they know it or not, and he has an impact that will go on for generations and generations. He told me recently that he had his foot and his hands in virtually every stream, pond, lake, or puddle in Newburgh, where he and his brother grew up. There were very good students. He ended up going to Harvard. He took a brief trip over to Sierra Leone with the Corps and decided to get married with his wife Joyce, who I understand cannot be here tonight, unfortunately. She had a prior commitment. But what they learned was it wasn't so bad to live in a one-room house with no screens, no windows, no running water, no toilets.